Though the history of Japanese animated film stretches back to the early 1900s, what is today called anime, and specifically Japanese anime, didn't really exist until the late 50s and early 60s, long after Japanese animation had been used as a propaganda tool during World War II and the subsequent Reconstruction era. It was then that two studios popped up and began producing animated films and television series, Toei Animations and Mushi Production. 1963 saw the release of Astro Boy, created by manga pioneer Osamu Tezuka, which proved popular not only in Japan, but also overseas, particularly in America, where an insatiable appetite for Japanese cartoons was born. While a few feature animated films had success in Japan, it was television that was truly profitable, and by the 70s, when the Japanese film market all but collapsed, there were dozens of anime television series exported across the globe. On the heels of enormously successful animes like Mobile Suit Gundam, the 1980s saw a revival in the Japanese animated feature film market, helping give birth to Japanese cinema's second golden age and the otaku subculture. After the roaring success of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata founded Studio Ghibli in 1985, and with the home video boom, Japanese anime became even more accessible to Western audiences. It was at the height of this incredible animation boom that one humble manga writer decided to make his first feature film, which would not only be the most expensive Japanese animated film made at the time, but would also become a bona fide international phenomenon, a film that remains a pivotal landmark in the history of not only anime, but also of science fiction cinema.
It is 2019, over 30 years after World War III and the creation of Neo-Tokyo. Despite its enormity and technological greatness, Neo-Tokyo is plagued by delinquent youths, high unemployment, civil unrest, and motorcycle gangs who have taken to the streets in an all-out war with one another. When one of these motorcycle gangs encounters a strange boy with inexplicable powers, a secret agency swoops in, taking away the boy and an injured motorcyclist named Tetsuo Shima, best friend of the gang's leader, Kaneda. As Kaneda strives to rescue his friend, he finds himself entwined with an underground resistance movement fighting against the agency, which is not only conducting dangerous experiments on Tetsuo, but which successfully executes a coup over the government. As chaos erupts, Tetsuo discovers new abilities of his own that are so great they threaten to destroy Neo-Tokyo, and only Kaneda can stop him.
Before we go any further, if you could please hit that like button, we might be able to stop Akira from being reborn. If you really do like this video, please subscribe as well. Thank you in advance. With that out of the way, let's get back to the subject at hand. Inspired by the classic manga Tetsujin Nijuhachi Go, Katsuhiro Otomo, a manga artist who'd had moderate success with paranormal sci-fi titles like Fireball and Domu, hit it big with the 1982 launch of Akira, which would ultimately run for 8 years and over 120 chapters. It was one of the first manga to be translated into English and published in the United States, and it is considered a watershed comic in its own right. Around 1986, before the manga was anywhere near completion, Otomo, who'd had some experience with animation working on films like Harmageddon Genma Tyson, was approached with the opportunity to adapt Akira into a feature-length film. He agreed on condition that he retain full creative control of the project. He approached the adaptation as a streamlined alternate take on what would roughly be the first half of the manga, excising whole subplots, melding characters, and changing several important details, all while striving to retain most of the core thematic and aesthetic elements that made Akira so popular. He wrote this new version by first coming up with a suitable conclusion, as he hadn't yet come up with one for his manga, and then working it backwards into something that could be squeezed into a roughly 2-hour feature film. Many companies saw this as an opportunity to create a grand epic, and so together they formed the Akira Committee, a group consisting of at least 7 major corporations, including Toho, Bandai, and Kodansha, that all agreed to help finance and market the film, with Tokyo Movie Shinsha in charge of producing the actual animation. In total, Akira was given a budget of 700 million yen, which was around $5.5 million US at the time, more money than had been spent by any other anime film to date. Due to its scope and ambition, Akira was an enormous undertaking, requiring over 70 animators working 24 hours a day, including the likes of animation icons Makiko Futaki and Yoshiji Kigami. It utilized a staggering number of shots, exceeding 22,000, and a record-breaking color palette of 327 different colors. It was also a revolutionary production on the bleeding edge of technology and animation techniques, using computers to not only create unique animations, which were put together by a high-tech lab, but also to calculate the physics of hand-drawn animations and to align the vocal performances. While it was common practice in the West to utilize pre-scoring, meaning that actors perform their lines before the animation work has begun, it was almost unheard of in Japan, where pre-scoring had previously been deemed prohibitively expensive. For Akira, though, Katsuhiro Otomo insisted upon it, believing that actors would be free to concentrate on the emotional weight of their performances rather than concerning themselves with lip-syncing. It also allowed the animators to more precisely create the unique mouth movements of the characters, with the assistance of computer software. For the vocal talent, Otomo wanted to avoid recognizable voice actors, envisioning his characters as common street kids and gruff adults who wouldn't sound like movie stars. Otomo originally hoped to get actual people off the street, but he recognized the impracticality of that idea. Still, almost the entirety of the cast is made up of relative unknowns at the time, though a few of them would go on to have very successful careers in Japanese film and television, both in animation and in live action. Also recorded ahead of time was the music, put together by Gaino Yamashiro Gumi, a music collective founded by Tsutomu Ohashi, under the pseudonym Shoji Yamashiro, that strived to meld ethnic folk music from around the world with futuristic instruments and synthesizers. This group is responsible for giving Akira its unique and effective soundtrack, which uses Indonesian bamboo instruments, digital synths, traditional Japanese no music, enormous vocal choirs, and even a smattering of prog rock. While all of Akira's music was made ahead of time in recorded modules, there was some post-production editing involved to match it up with the final edit. After a massive marketing campaign conducted by the different companies of the Akira Committee, Akira hit Japanese theaters in July of 1988. Despite being the 6th highest grossing film of the year, its 750 million yen in distribution rentals was seen as a box office disappointment, if not an outright failure, as it wasn't nearly enough to offset both the production budget and the marketing costs. However, one of the corporations of the Akira Committee, Kodansha, was eager to distribute the film internationally, specifically to the United States, where the Akira manga was proving extraordinarily popular. The subsequent English-language dub of the film was deemed unmarketable in the US by none other than George Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
Well, it doesn't look like much, but it still works pretty good.
But newly founded Streamline Pictures was up to the task, releasing the film to American audiences in late 1989 to a respectable box office return of around $1 million. It was later released in other countries like the United Kingdom and Australia to similar success, becoming an international hit that would prove to be wildly influential and almost single-handedly responsible for making anime a household term in all corners of the globe.
This is the exotic, bizarre, and beautiful world of Japanese anime. And this is your invitation to enter with the modern classic Akira. Critics say Akira makes Blade Runner look like Disney World.
Now, before I get into my own opinion and analysis of Akira, I'm going to bring in my friend Lin, who is much more well-versed in anime of the 21st century than I am. So without any further ado about nerd things,
Take it away, Lin.
Oh, hello. You caught me revisiting old classics. So, Eric threw you to the anime guy to talk about Akira, huh? I remember the first time I saw Akira, back in Burma where I grew up. Back then, most anime I was watching was like Studio Ghibli films, which I loved, but boy, my 12-year-old mind was not prepared for what Akira had in store for me. It was in Japanese, with English subtitles, a language I didn't speak, and a language I barely understood. But the visuals, those spoke a universal language. Akira showed me animation didn't have any limitations. It didn't have to be for kids. I didn't know the distinction, or even the word anime, a label I wouldn't learn until I got to Australia. I just knew that some animations made in Japan can be serious, violent, and sometimes a little sexy. And Japan is the only place Akira could have come out of. No, I'm not going down the weeb road of Japan being this awesome, perfect place. I'm talking about the atomic bomb, and Japan being the singular country that had it used on them. If you look at the impact 9/11 had on the American culture and art, especially in New York, you can understand how destruction of that magnitude would have had on a collective consciousness of a country. Other countries might imagine post-apocalyptic fiction. Japan had lived through its closest thing. You can see its effect clear as day in this movie. I know the big explosions in this movie aren't nuclear related, but it's clearly invoking that imagery. And they treat it as if they like natural disasters. The explosion the movie began with washed over Tokyo in silence as we watch from an aerial perspective, and the one it ends with also expands slowly, creeping over everything destructively. Contrasted to scenes of other nuclear impact like in Terminator 2. The loud, bombastic, horrific nature as it tears through the landscape and people. Whereas post 9/11 cultural psyche and the art it impacts goes for that righteous, though often misdirected, anger. Post-World War II Japan didn't have that luxury. It didn't have the international community rallying behind the destruction it suffered. They lost the war, and they were rightfully told they were the villain. And they had no choice but to internalize this attack as if it were a natural disaster. And it shows through in works like Akira. I think it also explains the morality of Akira, or rather the pointed lack of morality in Akira. There are really no villains. There are people who does villainous acts, but no one actually is out to do anything the movie straight up condemn as inherently evil. If there is a general thesis in this movie, it's that people, isolated and underinformed, following their functions and their baser instincts, slouches towards inevitable destruction. None of its main characters even grasp the full picture, even by the end of the movie, though they make decisions that have massive impact. The anti-government forces in this movie are ironically turned out to be funded by somebody from inside the government. The antagonist is a scared little boy grasping at his first taste of power and wielding it for petty revenge against imagined slights. Even the city at large, they don't know who or what Akira is, but they welcome its coming. When Tetsuo shows up, they just follow him blindly, literally to their own demise, not knowing anything about the context of the actual conflict. They all contribute to the disaster that the movie clearly portrays as inevitable. Akira is a strange beast because it ends in destruction, but also have a very hopeful ending, with the implication that its main antagonist Tetsuo may have found peace, or have even become a godlike being. So I think it's easy to imagine Akira as a work has pity for the powerless and misinformed characters. But I can't help but feel like it's not pity, but disdain it has. It suddenly had disdain for consumerism. Look at the shot that shows the cute little dog food commercial and then transitions straight into two vicious attack dogs that get brutally gunned down in front of a child. The contrast is clear between the ideal world the advertisement sells and the rot of reality. I can't help but see Akira as the story of humanity that didn't learn anything from the destruction the movie began with, which is far-reaching because we were told it sparked World War III. It is a story of people who set up shop literally down the street to make the same mistakes again. That's the thing. In other works like even Blade Runner, the contrast between the extravagance and the poverty, the ghetto and the high street, that contrast is shown with a very sharp divide. In Akira, there is a deliberate resistance towards showing it as a divide. but more as a transition. The anti-government agent on the run in the beginning goes past people honking and raging at the traffic in the commercial center of Neo-Tokyo, and then he rounds a corner and he's faced with roadblocks, cars on fire, a riot that is being violently put down by the police. In the opening scene, we see the rundown street that the bar is on, and the bustling city in the background. But it's not far away, nor it's in sharp contrast. The two blend seamlessly. It could be a block away. The decay and the development occupy the same space. Much like a festering wound, there isn't a clean divide between where it ends and healthy flesh begins. One just transitions into the other. Whether that is a realistic or a cynical view of humanity and the communities we build, well, that's up to you to decide. All of this is why I feel Akira is a singular vision. And while it's well known enough, it's still wildly underrated, and its impact goes unknown by the larger pop culture. I mean, the famous bike sliding to a stop scene alone has been replicated by 100 animated shows, both Japanese and Western. And I challenge you to find any modern cyberpunk writer who hasn't listed Akira as one of the influences at one point or another. You can even see its influence on very recent stuff, like everything to do with the story of 11 in Stranger Things. Hell, the phrase from the iconic jacket, "good for health, bad for education," even shows up in Kong Skull Island. Well, at least the bike shows up in that nostalgic fest, Ready Player One. Well, that's my contribution. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on the channel Much Ado About Nerd Things. And me and Eric also have a podcast where we talk about TV shows and movies. It's called The Streaming HEAP. Eric, put the link in the description, will ya? Oh, and I'm sorry I said on your channel. Back to you.
So thank you, Lin. That was really insightful. And if I repeat any of the kinds of things you were saying, it's only because you're very smart and your analysis is pretty much spot on. So, suffice it to say, Akira might be the most important anime film ever made. At least it's in the top 3 or 4, okay? So, without any more ado about nerd things, let's get on to my opinion and analysis. Like many Westerners, Akira was my entry to the world of anime. I fell in love with the genre and gobbled up as much of it as I could get my hands on, which back then wasn't very much. I have fond memories of Ghost in the Shell, Fist of the North Star, Golgo 13, and Kiki's Delivery Service, until somewhere around the turn of the century when I saw the brilliant but deeply disturbing Perfect Blue and decided I'd seen enough. I know I've missed out on a lot of anime in the intervening years, but I'm trying to catch up, at least a little bit. Still, Akira has always remained with me as one of the greatest animes of all time, and it remains one of the most culturally important pieces of sci-fi cinema to come out of Japan, right alongside that famous lizard. Now, like Godzilla, it is a meditation on the Japanese psyche following World War II. It talks directly about the post-construction malaise, and it is a none too subtle allegory for the turmoil of the 1970s, where unemployment, poverty, and delinquent youth culture were prominent throughout Tokyo.
We've come so far, crawling up from the rubble. The passion to build is cooled, and the joy of reconstruction forgotten. Now it's just a garbage heap made up of a bunch of hedonistic fools.
Underneath it all is also a philosophical meditation on the nature of power, of whether or not mankind is worthy of harnessing godlike abilities. The metaphor given in the film is about what an amoeba would do with the power of a human, that an amoeba would just use it to feed itself more efficiently.
Akira is an amoeba then?
Therefore, when Tetsuo is given the power of a god, he only wants to use it for his own selfish aims, which inevitably leads to his losing control and destroying Neo-Tokyo. The obvious subtext here is about the nuclear bomb, asserting that humanity has outpaced natural evolution and now has access to powers beyond what it has the ability to wield responsibly. However, while Otomo certainly deals with nuclear panic, the bureaucratic politics of the country, and the looming threats of authoritarianism and corporatism, he wisely couches it all in a more grounded story about friendship and loss. The film version of Akira is more focused on the relationship between Tetsuo and Kaneda than the manga. And though neither of these young men truly fit the definitions of villain or hero, they are the main forces tugging at the emotional core of the story.
Tetsuo!
and it is their relationship that ultimately allows Tetsuo to overcome his rage and fear and to be freed by Akira with the creation of another universe. Sure, the movie deals in some pretty wild, fantastic ideas like crazy super psychic abilities and secretive paramilitary government agencies, but looking past all of its trappings, past the trippy teddy bear monster and the gross cybernetic flesh kaiju, you can see a deeply personal work that takes a pretty honest perspective on the human condition. It is this, above all else, above its international success, its lasting influence, its groundbreaking soundtrack, and its wonderfully insane visuals, that makes Akira deserving of the title of sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. If you've gotten into anime, what film or series did it for you? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support what I do even more, please consider joining my Patreon to get early access to videos, vote on future topics, and more. You can also check out my website at emigil.com, where you'll find written reviews of plenty more sci-fi classics in both film and literature. And don't forget to listen to my podcast, The Streaming Heap, available wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, though, when I might make your head explode, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Don't mess with us, you bald old
Any
goat.
of you listening?
You lost me halfway through, sir!
Discipline!
Oh.
Discipline! Discipline! Discipline!